friends, my name is Millie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be bringing you my June reading wrap up. So in June I actually had one of my best reading months ever. I read a grand total of 20 books, and although I didn't have as many 5 stars as in May, reading 20 books in a month is insane. Like, that is a lot of books to read. I did have 1 week off of work and quite a few of these were actually graphic novels, so that obviously helped. But considering I had a very busy month going on, I'm really pleased with how much I've managed to read in June. It was my birthday month, so there's a lot going on to do with that. And also I went to go and see Taylor Swift for the first time, which was just amazing, the most incredible experience of my entire life. I will have a vlog chronicling my birthday week and the Eras tour on my channel at some point, but there is a lot of footage to edit, so the chances are this video will probably be up before that. Keep an eye out for it. It will come eventually. But yeah, it was a very busy month in terms of that 1 week. So considering that I had that much going on, I'm so pleased I did manage to read 20 books. So let's just dive right into the stats, shall we? So as I said, I read 20 books in June, and across those 20 books I read a grand total of 7,269 pages, which breaks down to an average of 242 pages a day, which I think is a really great average. On average, I like to read at least 100 pages of a book per day, and as I'm normally reading 2 books at the same time, one physically and one on NetGalley, that kind of works out. It actually means that I was achieving over my reading goal, which is how I managed to read 20 books in the month, I feel. In terms of the formatting, 13 books were novels, 6 books were graphic novels, and 1 was a novella. So although graphic novels were a fairly large proportion, these were quite long graphic novels, to be fair, and also the majority of the books I read were still traditional novels, so I'm still really pleased that I managed to read that much in a whole month. And then in terms of like the source material, 10 books or 50% of what I read were physical reads, 6 were ebooks, which means that I read them on NetGalley, and 4 books were a mixture, which means that while I had them on NetGalley, I was actually reading them physically. So I am really pleased with that. I think that that was a great sort of mixture. Obviously, I have said that my goal would be to read more than 6 books actually on NetGalley in a month if I can. However, obviously I had a lot going on and I still managed to cross off from that 10 books from NetGalley, so it's still a pretty good month, I feel. And actually the biggest shock to me this month was that 75% or 15 of the books that I read were adult. This really shocked me. Normally it's kind of a fairly even split between whether books were adult books or YA, with occasionally another age bracket making it into the mixture. Traditionally probably it's going to be like middle grade or new adult. I don't really tend to read any children's books. But to have it be the vast majority of the books I read were adult and still to have read 20 books in a month, I'm really shocked at that. Obviously YA books are slightly easier and quicker to read because adult books tend to be a lot denser, have heavier topics. So I'm really shocked at this and shocked at myself too, because I really do consider myself a YA reader. So to be reading the majority of my books as adult, that really surprised me. And then in terms of the genres this month, it was kind of not a very broad range. Of course, the majority of the books were fantasy. 9 books I read were fantasy books. That is no surprise to absolutely anybody. Fantasy is my favourite genre, so of course the majority are going to be fantasy. But I then also read quite a lot, and nearly the exact same amount as fantasy, of romance books. I think that that helped because I did, I believe, class the graphic novels that I was reading as romance books, but I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, a lot of romance going on this month, which is always fun. It's always fun to read romance in summer, especially, even though the UK weather hasn't exactly been playing ball in terms of that. It still was nice to be reading some romance in the slightly sunnier days that we had. And the only other genres I read were contemporary and historical. I read 2 contemporary books and 1 historical book. Not a very broad range this month. Normally I have quite a few other little genres popping in there, but only 4 this month. And then in terms of the ratings, it wasn't as successful a month as May, as I said, because I had less 5-star reads. I only had 2 5-star reads this month, but I still had 2 5-star reads this month, and they were easily 5-star reads. Like, there was no question about them. I wasn't trying to find 5-star reads this month. I was just really happy with the ratings I was giving and with only having those 2 as 5 stars because they were very deserving of that rating. But I did have quite a few high ratings anyway. I had 5 4.5-star reads and 7 4-star reads, which is really high. It still means that my average rating this month was 3.9, which I'm very, very happy with. I would like to eventually, hopefully one day, get my average rating of the month to be 4 or above. But to get to 3.9, I'm really pleased with. I only managed to achieve that one other month this year, and that was in May when I had 5 5-star reads. So June and May kind of still balanced each other out in terms of that. And then I had 2 3.5-star reads, 2 3-star reads, no 2.5-star reads, and 2 2-star reads, and no 1.5 or 1-star reads, and no DNFs either. So I was really pleased with that. It means that I was really enjoying what I was reading this month, which always a good sign. So let's dive into the actual books. So I'm going to do it a bit differently this reading wrap up. Normally I go from the lowest that I've rated a book to the highest, saving my 5 stars for last. But what I'm actually going to do this month is I'm going to go with what I read in order of when I read it. So that means that we are starting off strong with my first 5-star read of the month, which was actually my first read of the month overall, and that was Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. This completely blew me away. I was not expecting it to be a 5-star read. I was expecting to love it, but nowhere near how much I actually ended up doing so. I had been putting this off for a little while. I was just kind of a little bit intimidated by it, I guess. It's quite a big book, and I heard really, really great things about it, so I was just kind of waiting for the perfect time. But I realised that this month would actually be 2 years since I had received this book in the Fairy Loot box. This is the gorgeous Fairy Loot edition, and I realised I just need to get around to reading it. It was going to be the perfect read to kick off Pride Month as well, and I am so glad that I read this. It was just incredible. I was completely blown away, just so immersed in the world as well. This is a witchy modern story. It's set in Northern England as well, actually, so a lot of it is set in Manchester, which is just fantastic. That's where I'm from. So I loved getting to see all of the kind of Manchester landmarks, getting to see like Affleck's Palace that they were being talked about. That was a lot of fun. And in this one you're following a group of friends. So they've been friends since they were kids, since they were sort of in their early teens, and they're all witches, and in their early teens they were initiated into Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which is a covert coven of witches set up nationwide across Britain. And it was actually set up by Anne Boleyn, and there is actually a prequel that's coming out later this year in just a couple of months, which I'm so excited for, that's sort of telling the story of when the coven was founded. So you have Neve, who is kind of the biggest main character, and she comes across the Sullied Child, or she is asked to take in the Sullied Child, who is a child who is prophesied to bring about the end of the world. And the coven is destined to stop this Sullied Child from doing so, but obviously because the child they come across is a child, no one really wants to actually kill this kid. But what if they don't? Would that mean the end of the world? And it kind of ends up that a lot of the friends in this friendship group, they're kind of all on different sides about it. They have different opinions, and it's really a story of friendship and family and what's right, what's wrong, how do you choose what to do in this kind of a situation. And I just loved it. I was so immersed into the world, and it was just so twisty as well. There were so many plot twists going on in this. I was blown away. The ending, I was so shocked. I was completely just in awe of this author's writing, and the world building, the witchcraft, just incredible. If you haven't picked up Her Majesty's Royal Coven yet, I would highly recommend that you do so. Fantastic. And the next book that I read was a 4-star read, and that was The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields, kind of going with a witchy theme at the start of the month. And this is a sapphic love story. We're following Marigold, who has always preferred the company of the spirits of the meadow to the suitors who are trying to woo her. So when her grandmother offers her the chance to be the next Witch of Innisfree, she jumps at the chance. The only catch that comes with such a role is that nobody can fall in love with the Witch of Innisfree. Marigold isn't bothered by that. She's ready to take on the mantle from her grandmother, learn all that she can, until she comes across Lottie, who doesn't believe in magic, and Marigold is determined to prove her wrong, to prove to her that magic exists and is real, and that what she does is real. And a kind of little love story ensues. And there's also a kind of deeper plot going on. There's kind of threats happening to Innisfree. Things keep going wrong, crops keep dying, and it's a really intriguing mystery aspect to it. And I really enjoyed this. It's just a delightful, cozy fantasy. The vibes are just immaculate. There's bees, cute little cottage, flower meadows, sunshine, little moonlit pool. The vibes are just absolutely perfect and completely match the style of this book. This is once again the gorgeous Fairy edition of this book, and all of it was just so lovely. This book really just felt so peaceful, which admittedly is kind of a reason why it's a 4-star read and not higher, because the stakes didn't feel particularly high. I wasn't completely invested in the action sequences and like the kind of mystery plot going on. I was far more interested in the romance and in the magic system as a whole, with the kind of honey magic system that's going on. But it was just the kind of world that I wish I could visit. There's a really lovely grandmother-granddaughter relationship in here, and honestly, if you're just looking for a nice, sweet, calming read, I would recommend picking this one up. The next book I read was sadly one of my 2-star reads, and that was A Letter to the Luminous Deep by Sylvie Catherall. This is an adult fantasy, and it's about two people, E and Henry, who are writing letters to each other, and then a year later we're following their siblings because E and Henry have disappeared and they're writing letters to each other now. It's a story told in letters, it's an epistolary novel, and you're kind of trying to uncover what happened to E and Henry, as well as working out the secret that they themselves uncovered a year ago. And you get to see their letters that they sent to each other told kind of through the perspective of their siblings finding these letters. And that aspect is kind of interesting. However, it just fell flat for me. Epistolary novels can work really well, but in this one, I feel like the 4 main characters were completely indistinguishable from each other. I could not tell you whose perspective I was reading from. I was very glad for the titles at the start of each letter saying from so-and-so to so-and-so in the year of, because otherwise I would have had no clue who was speaking, what they were talking about, what was going on. And to be honest, I couldn't really tell you what happened in this book. I'm not entirely sure what happened at all, how the ending played out, what happened to Ian Henry. There is going to be a sequel, but I'm not going to pick it up because it would mean I'd have to reread the first book, and I just don't really want to. And for a fairly short book, this took me a long time to read. It was only just under 300, but it took me ages to read. I was just really struggling to get through it because I just didn't care. And honestly, if it hadn't been a NetGalley read, I'd have considered DNFing it, so make of that what you will. The next book that I read was the novella, and I gave this 4 stars. It was Nick and Charlie by Alice Oseman. This is a little novella set in the Heartstopper universe. It's kind of following Nick and Charlie as Nick is deciding about university, Charlie doesn't want him to go, and it's really just a little slice of life. It's adorable. Nick and Charlie are adorable. I just love them. I love them. Cannot wait for the final volume of Heartstopper, whenever that is going to come out. Kind of hope it doesn't come out for ages so that I don't have to leave this world and these characters. But I am very excited for the next season of the TV show to come out in a few months. I just love Nick and Charlie. They're so cute. And this novella was also so cute. I then read my second and final 5-star read of the month, and it was actually to the sequel to Her Majesty's Royal Coven, The Shadow Cabinet by Juno Dawson. The lighting has gone absolutely terrible. It's only like 4 o'clock right now, but it feels like it's about 9 o'clock at night because clouds are very dark grey. So I'm very sorry for how dark and dingy this video might look, but we're going to persevere. So The Shadow Cabinet was my second 5-star read of the month, and first of all, sorry, that ending, what the hell? That was an absolutely insane ending. I just couldn't wrap my head around it at all. So obviously this is the sequel to Her Majesty's Royal Coven, so I can't explain that much about what happened in it without spoiling the events of both Her Majesty's Royal Coven and this book, but it was incredible. I don't know whether this or Her Majesty's Royal Coven were my favourites, but I loved both of them so much, and I desperately need the sequel to this one. But it's not going to come out for ages because we've got Queen Bee, the prequel, coming out this year, so that means Human Rights is definitely not going to be out this year. And I'm so sad because I need it so badly. I'll make do with Queen Bee, and I'm sure it will be also incredible and a 5-star read. But I need to know what happens after that ending. This has just easily become one of my favourite series, and I'm so glad that I read it this month. As soon as I finished HMRC, I knew I needed to pick up the sequel as soon as possible because the ending of HMRC had me shook. I couldn't stop thinking about it, so as soon as I possibly could, I was picking up the Shadow Cabinet, and I'm so glad that I did because I felt still so immersed in the world, in these characters, and feeling the emotions of everything that had gone on in the first book, and it was all just so intensified in this book. This one is even darker and more tense than the first one. The stakes are dialed up to 11, so much tension, just incredible, absolutely incredible. Please read this series and come and yell at me about it because I need to yell at someone about it because it was fantastic. I then read a very highly anticipated release for me, and it turned out to be a 4-star read, so sadly not a 5-star read like I was hoping it would be because I do love this author, but that was Faebound by Sarah El-Arifi. Once again, gorgeous fairy edition. So this follows 2 elven sisters who end up being banished from the land of the elves, and for certain reasons, and they end up coming across Fae who have not been seen for a millennium in this land. So at the very start of the story you get kind of told the origins of this land, about the origins of the Fae, of the elves and of humans, but at this point in the story humans are extinct, Fae are thought to be extinct, elves are the only living creatures, apart from animals, left, and elves actually have this war going on, and it all involves drum magic, but in order to make the drums they have to kill these creatures to get their skins. So while these 2 elven sisters are banished, one of them comes across one of these creatures and kills it for its skin so that she can make a very powerful drum and hopefully be accepted back into the elven tribe. However, once they kill this creature, Fae appear, and it turns out that when you kill one of these creatures, you end up killing a Fae. So all the time that the elves have been killing creatures, they've been killing Fae, albeit inadvertently, and the Fae want to punish these 2 elven sisters for their crimes. So they take them back to the Fae world, which is kind of like underground, to hide from the elves, and what ensues is a story of how they're going to get back to the elves, what's going to happen with the Fae as well. And I love Sarah El-Arifi. I really love her Final Strife series, the third of which, and the final one, is coming out later this year. So excited for. But this one I was very excited for because it's the start of a new trilogy, and I was really hopeful that this would be a new favourite. And while it wasn't as much of a favourite as the Final Strife, it was still a really, really great read. And I will always read whatever Sarah El-Arifi writes at this point, so it wasn't a hard choice to pick this one up. And also I feel like with this world, the author could definitely do some sort of delving into the past in a story, which I would love to see. The characters were really genuine and well crafted, and I love to see the relationship between the 2 sisters grow and develop as the book went on. I think that the only thing for me was that I just didn't really get to grips with the magic system. I would have loved to have seen more of the drum magic rather than how the Fae magic worked. I really would have preferred to see more of the drum magic in here, so hopefully we'll get to see more of that in the sequel. But still a really, really great read, and I love Sarah El-Arifi so much. The next book that I read was a 4.5-star read, and I loved it. It was Truly, Madly, Deeply by Alexandria Bellefleur, and this is an adult romance, and you're following Truly, who is a best-selling romance novelist who always believes in true love until she realises her parents are separating, and her entire worldview on love is crumbling down around her. She ends up going on this podcast, and one of the other guests is Colin, and they kind of make a bad first impression on each other, and Colin kind of runs after her, desperate to make things up, and what ensues is so lovely. I adore both of them so much. The banter in here is impeccable. I loved it. The chemistry was fantastic. It was super quick and easy to read. Both the characters, I adore them. They were really just so wonderful together. I mean, 3 cheers for the fact that this book did not have any miscommunication trope in here. My least favourite trope of all time, and there was no sign of it in here. They both communicated to each other perfectly, and it was so refreshing to see, actually. You don't really get to see that level of good communication in here in a lot of books, but it was in here. They know how to acknowledge, accept and understand each other's feelings, and it was just really, really beautiful. I loved Truly as a main character. I loved Colin as a love interest. I would have loved to have seen his perspective, actually, because he was just an utter simp for Truly, and I was there for every single second of it. If you need a good romance to pick up Truly Madly Deeply. And I'm going to then talk about the next 6 books all in one, because this was a whole series that I read in a week, in my birthday week, and they are all graphic novels. And because I read them in such quick succession in the series, they kind of all blurred into one. And obviously, in order to make this video a little bit quicker, we're going to talk about them all in one go. So this is, of course, the Lore Olympus series by Rachel Smythe. And let's talk about the ratings that I gave each individual volume first of all. So starting off with volume 1, I gave this 4 stars. Volume 2, I gave 4.5 stars. Volume 3, I gave 4 stars. Volume 4, I gave 4 stars. Volume 5, I gave 3.5 stars. And volume 6, I gave 4.5 stars. So I really enjoyed this series as a whole. Obviously, volume 5 was my least favourite. I kind of felt like that was because it was kind of a bit filler-esque. I didn't really feel like it stood out from any of the other volumes by itself. Volumes 2 and 6 were my favourites in the series. I really, really enjoyed these. I feel like that was because we saw Hades and Persephone actually together most of the time. But anyway, what this series is about, first of all, is that this series is a Greek mythology retelling graphic novel series about Hades and Persephone, and the gods are kind of in modern times. I think the human world is still in ancient Greek times, but the gods are in modern times. They have phones, they have jobs and skyscrapers and etc. So it was a really, really fun series. The 7th volume is coming out later this year in October, I think it is, but I really enjoyed the series as a whole. I know so many people love it. Everyone says it's like the epitome of mutual pining, and I do have to agree. However, my biggest gripe with this series, before I talk about the positives, is that for much of this series, Hades and Persephone are not with each other. They are separated from each other, and I really felt like that ended up giving us not enough understanding of their mutual pining. Like, you know, I didn't feel like before volume 6 they were together nearly enough to be feeling the level of feelings that they were for each other. It just didn't feel very realistic, or at least like we as the readers could connect to it enough. But it's still a really fun read. It's a refreshing, different take on Hades and Persephone, and what I quite like about the series is that the whole kind of incestuous aspect to Greek mythology doesn't really exist in here. The Olympian Six, so Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, etc., apart from the 3 brothers, none of them are really acknowledged as being siblings. So I kind of like that, you know, Hades isn't Persephone's uncle in here, to put it lightly. And there's also a lot of heavy topics in here that I wasn't expecting. There's sexual assault, there is parental abuse, like mental abuse, physical abuse, and that made it for a very interesting read because I wasn't expecting any of that. But I really liked how the author approached these topics and how they were dealt with within the story by the different characters. I feel like it was very realistic and made it very genuine to read. You could really feel the emotions of each of the characters regarding these topics. And what I really loved was how Hades was a complete softie. You know, he presents this hard exterior, but you can tell in these books how much of a softie he is, particularly for Persephone, and we're always here for that. We're always here for a simp. But my favourite character was actually Hecate, which I wasn't expecting at all. She's kind of a minor goddess in this, but she is a star. I love her. Please, can we have more of her or give her her own spin-off series? I love Hecate. But I do love the series, and I'm very excited for volume 7 to come out later this year. If you've read this series, please let me know which your favourite volume was, because I can't decide between volumes 2 and 6. I don't know which ones were my favourite. I just love that Hades and Persephone were actually with each other in those volumes. They were actually in each other's presence. And particularly that in volume 6, the romance actually finally starts to get somewhere rather than them just talking for 5 volumes. I then had a 3-star read that I kind of read in between reading the Lore Olympus volumes, which I read on NetGalley, and that was Death's Country by R.M. Ramiro. This was a novel written in verse, which I normally quite enjoy, not necessarily this one, but it follows 2 Miami teens who must travel to the underworld. So again, kind of weird that I read it at the same time as Lore Olympus, but they must travel to the underworld in order to retrieve their girlfriend's soul. So it's polyamorous, and I enjoyed just seeing that aspect of it, but the inverse aspect, I feel like it would have been better if it had been told in prose, honestly, because the inverse just didn't really add anything to it. Normally I would consider inverse like The Black Flamingo or Punching the Air. I would consider those to be really poetically beautiful, really gorgeously written, but this one was kind of just meh, honestly, in how the verse was written. It's kind of pitched as an Orpheus and Eurydice retelling, but it's not so much a retelling as it is inspired by it, and I feel like it would have been stronger actually if it had been a retelling, because it just would have been a lot more compelling. The story just didn't really flow very well, didn't really connect to the characters, but I did like the polyamorous relationship, and the author's take on the underworld was certainly unique. I think that this will be a book for some people, it just wasn't really a book for me. However, what was a book for me was another NetGalley read that I read kind of in between reading the Lore Olympus volumes, and that was The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I gave this 4.5 stars, and I don't know whether I might actually change it to be a 5-star read at some point, because I can't stop thinking about it, honestly. So this is an adult romance, and you're following Liam and Anna, and they got married in college. And it actually turned out to be a marriage of convenience. They were really just roommates, they barely knew each other, they just needed to be married for family housing, and at the end of it, they move out, never speak to each other for the next 5 years. And then Anna is fired from her job as a cashier, but she really needs the money. She is paying for her father's medical treatment, she needs the money for rent, and also Liam needs Anna because he has actually not told anybody that it was a fake marriage. So he is from a very, very, very rich family, like bajillionaires. So much money, it's incomprehensible. And he has actually been telling his family that he's been married for 5 years in order to throw them off his back, to get his dad to get off of his back. His dad really wants Liam to take over the company from him one day. Liam really doesn't want to. Liam is not interested in that amount of money. He's not interested in the really bad business practices that his dad takes part in. So he has been avoiding his family for 5 years, just saying he's been with his wife, and then his little sister is getting married and everyone says that he has to bring his wife to the wedding. So he goes to find Anna. It's the day after she's gotten fired, and they make a deal. Anna will come along to the wedding if Liam pays her, is it $200,000 or $100,000? I can't remember, but it's a lot of money to Anna, not a lot to Liam. So they make a deal about it, and they go to this wedding, which is held on a private island. Think Isle Esme from Twilight. So very, very beautiful, very secluded, very gorgeous vibes, very rich. Okay, Anna has never seen anything like it, and they only have like 12 hours on a plane or something to prepare her for this wealthy wife that she's supposed to be. Also, she's meant to be a doctor, and she's not. She's actually an artist, but Liam has been telling everyone that she's a doctor, so she's got to kind of pretend to be a doctor as well. So there's a lot going on, but it was so good. Like, fantastic. I loved it. Liam and Anna were just great together from the very start. I really loved how Liam appreciated Anna's kind of quirkiness and how he never told her to stop being herself at all, and how she was just so unapologetically herself as well. They were just really, really great together. The banter was witty and hilarious. There's fake dating, there's marriage of convenience, opposites attract, and it's slow burn, and the chemistry was just insane. If you love a slow burn romance and slow burn is like your favourite romance compared to like insta love, this is the book for you. The slow burn was impeccable, and this also had rich people drama in spades. If you love just seeing how rich people, like the attitudes and just the ridiculous lengths that they will go to impress people and to spend their money, please read this. It was so funny but also just terrible. His family are just completely awful in terms of their attitude towards life and towards money, but it was really interesting actually to put in a romance book. And a lot of it is to do with like breaking your expectations that your family has of you, particularly for Liam. His family has ridiculous expectations of him, and it's really all about how he kind of decides to choose his life and what he wants out of it, and that doesn't involve his family's money, and his dad is not happy about that. So it's really about how he can come to terms with that, what he's going to do, and it was just fantastic. It's also the perfect summer read, being set on a private island. I do think that it could have done without having a third act breakup. After everything that happened in this book, it felt kind of unnecessary, but the epilogue more than made up for it. This has one of the best romance epilogues I've ever read. Please read it just for the epilogue. Honestly, insane. And I then had an unfortunately 3-star read with the Luis Ortega Survival Club by Sonora Reyes. This is unfortunately a 3-star read because I love this author's debut, which was The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School. That was an amazing YA contemporary. I adored that. This one unfortunately just fell flat. I don't know whether it's like kind of second book syndrome almost, but you're following Ariana, who one night at a party is raped by Luis Ortega, and it's her story of survival. She has autism and selective mutism, and she only ever talks to her mum and dad, but her mum and dad are going through troubles of their own. Her mum has cheated on her dad, and she doesn't really have any friends at school, and she doesn't know who to tell about what's happened to her. She doesn't even know what's happened to her really. But what ensues is she finds this group of people who want to take down Luis Ortega. Some things have happened to them as well through him, and it's all about getting revenge. And while I enjoyed that aspect, and it was very powerful, I do think that every teenager should read this, particularly just to look at how it tackles consent. It really focuses on the importance of consent, and I think every teenager needs to read it just to understand that aspect of it. It just didn't quite live up to my expectations of this author. The writing felt quite stilted, the dialogue felt quite kind of cringeworthy, honestly, and I just didn't really feel like the romance that was in here, while it was cute, considering everything else that's going on, I'm not sure that it was needed in here. And also, apart from the main character and kind of the love interest, the side characters all kept blurring together in my mind, like the rest of the revenge group. I kept forgetting who each of them were and getting confused with their kind of backstories, so that was a bit unfortunate. So it's not really what I would consider to be this author's best work, but a really important one, and I will still read anything from this author because I love their debut so much. And I think if you can have a fantastic debut, a kind of mediocre second book, it happens to people. It just happens. It's fine. Then had another disappointment with a 3.5-star read in A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft. This is Alison Saft's first adult novel, and it was a bit underwhelming, honestly. You're following Lorelei, who is chosen for this quest. So in this realm, the king wants to find this spring which will grant someone like untold amounts of power, and this group of people are sent on this quest to find it. But while they're on this quest, the leader is murdered, and so it's kind of like a murder mystery aspect as well as this quest. There's a sapphic love story involved, but it was underwhelming. Considering how anticipated this book is, it fell a bit flat. Still a fantastic example of the author's kind of gorgeous writing, of the world building that this author can create. I really enjoyed the world building aspect, and the atmosphere was beautiful. There's sort of lots of folk tales, and I really loved getting to see the folklore be kind of immersed into the book, so it's kind of interwoven into the story, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I loved getting to read those little tidbits of folktales from this world. And I did also really like the romance. It's academic rivals to lovers in like the best way possible. One of them very clearly likes the other, and the other one has absolutely no idea about it and just thinks that they're academic rivals, and it was very, very cute. I really liked that. I think that I just was really struggling to care about the murder mystery aspect of things. I just didn't really feel like I cared about that as much as I cared about the quest that they were going on, and I also was really struggling to connect with Lorelei, the main character. She's very stubborn and very set in her ways, and I was just really struggling to feel like I could root for her. I feel like if we'd had some chapters that were from the perspective of the love interest, I would have connected to Lorelei more because we could have seen what the love interest saw in her. But the atmosphere was gorgeous. If you want a gorgeous atmosphere, pick this up. I was just kind of hoping it would be a bit more like A Far Wilder Magic by this author, or a bit more like A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. It was kind of giving me those vibes from the synopsis, and it didn't really live up to my expectations of it, sadly. I then had my other 2-star read of the month, and that was The Hedgewitch of Foxhall by Anna Bright. This is Welsh mythology inspired, and I'm going to really try to remember the synopsis of this one because honestly I couldn't tell you anything that happened in it, but it's following 2 princes, and in order to get the chance to rule, their dad has kind of sent them on a quest to find out why magic is disappearing from the land. And although I liked the Welsh mythology side of things, I found myself skimming a lot of this book, honestly. I just didn't really care about what was happening in it. If it hadn't been a NetGalley read, I would have DNF'd it for sure, because I just did not want to pick it up at all. There's no better word for it, and I wish there was, but it really just felt lifeless, honestly, and that sounds terrible. I hate to use that word on a book, but that was how it felt. I didn't care for the plot, I didn't care for the characters, I really struggled to distinguish the 2 princes from each other. There was a love triangle aspect, didn't care about the love triangle. I think it would have been much stronger if one side of the love triangle had been a friendship instead, and it had just been a romance between the other 2 characters, because love triangles, I don't enjoy it the best of times. In this one, I really didn't enjoy it. It's sadly such a miss for such a gorgeous cover, but that's how it was. I then read a 4-star read, and this one is actually kind of hard to show what it is, but it's Not for the Faint of Heart by Lex Croucher. I got it in this very, very beautiful ARC edition, but unfortunately the cover of the ARC edition doesn't have the title in the front, so just kind of hold it a bit like this. But it is kind of the tale of what comes after Robin Hood. You're following his granddaughter, and I love Robin Hood. I absolutely adore the Disney film. It was like one of my favourite Disney films growing up. Unfortunately, that did mean that whenever they mentioned Robin Hood in here, I was picturing a wily fox in a little green cap. I know that that's not who he was in the real tale. I know that he was a human, but because I've watched the Disney film like literally countless times, probably hundreds and hundreds of times, all I could picture was a fox. That was unfortunate. That's on me. But this is the tale of his granddaughter, and it's kind of about how the Merry Men have kind of forgotten what their original mission was. They're no longer really stealing from the rich to give to the poor. It's kind of all like fights and wars going on. There's still like the sheriff kind of thing, but it's not really about like giving back to the poor anymore, which is like where the plot of this story comes in. So a healer is kidnapped by the Merry Men in order to serve them, and she's kind of like, well, why are you kidnapping me? Why are you doing all of these fighting and this war when you should be giving to the poor? That's kind of the original aim. But the commander of the Merry Men, who is Robin Hood's son-in-law, I think, he wants to win. He wants to win against the sheriff, and that's his only goal, really. He doesn't really care about the poor anymore. And it was really fun, entertaining, quick and easy to read. I didn't love it as much as I loved Lex Croucher's Gwen and Art Are Not in Love, but it was still quick and easy to read, very entertaining, very funny, and fast-paced, action-packed. There is a romance in here, and I feel like that kind of got a bit lost as the story went on. There was a lot more going on in order to get the plot going, so I enjoyed that aspect. It really took me by surprise, and I really liked how the author was unafraid to include those aspects in the book. So if you're looking for a fun, quick, entertaining read and you liked the Robin Hood film as a kid, pick this one up. And the final book that I read in June was a 4.5-star read, so we ended the month on a high, and that was Can't Spell Treason Without T by Rebecca Fawn. Unfortunately, I don't have a physical copy of this book. I did read it on NetGalley, but because I loved it so much, I definitely want to pick up a physical copy as soon as I can. It was really fun. This is the story of, it's a cozy fantasy, and it's the story of 2 women who want to run away and open a bookshop together, and they decide to do just that. It's really all about escaping from the pressures of everyday life, the stresses of everyday life, and finding somewhere peaceful and relaxing to spend your days. But they end up in a town that is plagued by dragons, and that was a really fun aspect, seeing how they dealt with that. And this is really clearly heavily inspired by Legends and Lattes. And I've seen a lot of people saying that it just can't live up to Legends and Lattes, and I feel like you'd be hard pressed to find a book that can. But this takes up the cozy fantasy mantle very, very well. well. I think it did a really good job of being a cozy fantasy, and it's also going to be a series. I have been lucky enough to be sent the second book as an arc, so I'm very excited to read that as soon as I can. But it was cute, it was endearing, it was warm and funny, and if you're looking for something to fill the kind of cozy fantasy void after reading Legends and Lattes, pick this one up. It was a nice time. It was really it was lovely, honestly. And there were like splashes of adventure in here, which kind of excited the story a little bit. I think my only gripe was that the two perspectives of Kianthe and Rhaena did feel a little too similar to me. I would have preferred them to feel a bit more distinguished from each other, but other than that, I really enjoyed it, and I cannot wait to pick up the sequel. And I feel like there's going to be quite a few books in this series as well, so I'm very excited to see how it all plays out. So those were all of the books that I read in June. My favourites were obviously Her Majesty's Royal Coven and The Shadow Cabinet. I can't distinguish between the two as to which one was my favourite of the month at all. I love them both equally, and I cannot wait for Human Rights, the third book in the series, to come out hopefully next year. I really hope it is next year. If you read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them. Let me know what your favourite book of June was, and if you would recommend it to me as well. If you'd like to follow me on my Goodreads or on Bookstagram, the links to those are down in the description below. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna, and I will see you in another video soon. Bye!